You and Doug quickly took care of the remaining monsters after the assault. Once finished, you returned to Lloyd to check in. Lloyd told you that his detection magic showed no more threats, meaning they were safe for now. He asked Silica if she was feeling okay, and she confirmed she had rested enough. Seeing that everyone was done, Lloyd suggested they head back to the city immediately. You mentioned there was no need to rush, but Lloyd explained the real target of the people behind these events was the city of Ishtar. This revelation shocked you and everyone else. Lloyd clarified that the entire request was just a trick to keep the only S-rank adventurers away from Ishtar, without raising any suspicion. You wondered why someone would go to such lengths to keep them away. Cross felt the same, pointing out that Ishtar was strong enough even without them, as it had the hero knife and other adventurers. Lloyd agreed that everyone thought Ishtar was tough to beat. However, he warned them that whoever wanted to take down the kingdom was likely planning to attack again soon. The city was now defenseless, and Lloyd wanted everyone to trust him and head back immediately. Meanwhile, in a remote house, a group of hooded figures were planning something sinister. They were the masterminds behind the monster request that lured our party away. They were pleased with their success in drawing the S-rank adventurers out of the city. Not only that, but they had also dealt with Alan, using enhancement magic on a golem to threaten him. They expected the hero to be stronger, but to their surprise, he was quite weak, barely comparable to other heroes. These figures laughed as they recalled how the shield maiden lost her arm to a wolf, and how the so-called saint, who was supposed to heal any wound, turned out to be a complete fraud. They reveled in the pathetic reality of hero Alan. Their plan had been successful so far, thanks to their boss, and the woman they had shackled from head to toe. She looked like a beast, and these villains were using her magic for their own gain. They held something like a magic staff, adorned with a crystal that seemed to harness the power of the captured woman. They planned to exploit this power even more in the future. Releasing her was crucial for the resurrection of their god, so failure was not an option. They were determined to succeed in their evil plans, no matter what, for their boss and the demon god they worshipped. Meanwhile, this beast girl suffered due to their desires and needs. Back in Ishtar, in the hero Alan's palace, he was struggling with anger after failing repeatedly. He blamed everyone around him for his incompetence, while Sheena, Ruru, and Mia looked on, their expressions grim. The hero, wearing a pitiful face, couldn't believe that despite being the hero's party, they were still searching for new members. They couldn't find anyone suitable to replace Lena, and to their surprise, they couldn't even find a replacement for the so-called useless White Mage like Lloyd. Sheena asked him what they were going to do now. Mia told him that the reason they haven't found anyone is that nobody has actually applied for the job. Their requirements were set pretty high in the ad. She knew that after they failed the quest a few days ago, rumors spread through the royal capital like wildfire. People were saying their teammates were badly injured, and that they failed and ran away from the quest. She thought their days were numbered, and no matter how famous the hero was, not many people would apply to join their party anytime soon. Alan said they now had a few replacements for Lena, but the real problem was finding a replacement for the useless one, referring to Lloyd. He needed someone who could at least use storage magic. Sheena told him that none of the applicants could use it, and they could only cast 1 or 2 enhancement spells simultaneously. Rura asked what they would do without support. Alan said their best option for now was to go with whoever seemed the least bad. Just then, they heard a knock at the door. It was the soldiers who had come to discuss something with the hero. Alan asked what they wanted, and they told him they had received a message from a knight on patrol. The knight had seen a horde of about 10,000 monsters heading towards Ishtar through the forest. Among them, everyone was instantly terrified after hearing such a huge number. Alan asked what they wanted from him. The soldiers said they needed the hero's help to subdue the monsters, explaining that it was an emergency request. An emergency request is issued by the Order of Knights during a crisis, and the hero's party is required to accept it no matter what. If they refuse without a valid reason, the hero's title would be stripped. Alan wondered why something like this had to happen at such a time. The soldiers told him they would wait outside for his decision. He asked Sheena what would happen if he rejected the request, and she explained that his title would definitely be revoked. Since their funds came from the state, there would be backlash from the citizens if he declined the emergency request. Alan then said they could turn things around by taking on the request, erasing their past failure, and regaining their lost reputation. He asked Sheena if he was right, and she agreed. This was not only about dealing with a crisis, but also about covering up their bad reputation from fleeing their previous quest. Alan grinned, planning to showcase his strength to the world. Ruer tried to ask if he was serious about it. Alan announced to everyone that they would go and eliminate the monsters, so they should get ready as soon as possible. Alan wanted to be the center of attention during this emergency request to show everyone that he was the strongest. No one dared to oppose him, so they stayed silent. Meanwhile, in the forest, Lloyd, you, and the rest of the team were making your way back to the city of Ishtar, amazed at Lloyd's magic. You mentioned that everyone was able to run several times faster than usual, and at this pace, they would reach the city in no time. Lloyd said it was nothing special. He was just using enhancement magic to optimize their running. Silica asked him if he was okay, since he had been using enhancement magic continuously for a while now. He assured her that he was fine, and that this type of magic would indeed consume a lot of mana if he wasn't used to it. He explained that once they learned the trick to using magic, they could reduce the amount of power it consumed. They asked how he learned this trick. He replied that anyone would figure it out if they used it often enough, whether they liked it or not. He told them about the time his master left him in the forest for a week, ordering him to survive on his own. At that time, he wasn't sure how he could survive in the middle of the forest, as a white mage couldn't defeat monsters alone. So, he thought running was his only option, and understood that he needed to have good control. When Lloyd talked about using various enhancement spells to survive in the wild, he explained that it was during this time he experimented with many spells and made improvements, developing new enhancement spells. The others initially thought it must have been great training, but Lloyd clarified that it was intense and demanding. He reminisced about how his master, Merlin, was always pushing him harder, and he thought this rigorous training was normal because he was so inexperienced. Lloyd recalled how Merlin would get angry and push him to exceed his limits. You told him that such harsh training was far from normal, but Lloyd interpreted it as his training being below standard. Lloyd started to feel inadequate compared to the S-ranked adventurers, thinking they were on a different level. Suddenly, he stopped running. The others stopped as well, and asked what was wrong. Lloyd told them that his detection magic had sensed some life signs. They asked if there were more monsters, but he reassured them it wasn't monsters. Deep down, Lloyd had a bad feeling about what he sensed, suspecting it was a familiar presence he had felt before. He apologized and asked the group to continue while he checked something out. You insisted on coming with him, reminding him that they were there to help and he shouldn't go alone. Lloyd acknowledged that you were right and apologized for delaying them. You assured him that as his party, they were there to support him. Lloyd was once again reminded of how kind and dependable his party members were. He asked them to follow him as they approached the location of the presence he sensed, which seemed to be coming from the same cabin where the beast girl was chained, with a magic staff by her side. Back at the Adventurers Guild, Hero Alan watched the adventurers gathering to accept the emergency quest. He started mocking them, calling them weak, which made some of them angry enough to shout back. However, they soon quieted down as Alan continued to insult the adventurers. The soldiers informed him that their S-ranked adventurers were out of town, and Ishtar currently had no S-rankers available. This meant everyone here was B rank or lower. Alan sneered, saying they could be used as cannon fodder, and told them not to hold him back against the monsters. With that, they began their strategy meeting for the monster subjugation. Alan laid out his plan, instructing everyone on their roles. He told the mages to start with their most powerful spells and take down at least 10 monsters with each attack. The mages were shocked by Alan's demands, but he insisted that the knights would keep the monsters busy, buying time for the mages to regain their mana and repeat the attack cycle. Alan believed this would be enough to defeat all the monsters, but he was the only one who thought this was a viable strategy. The others were stunned to hear such a plan from a hero. Frustrated by their silence, Alan demanded to know if they had any issues with his plan. One of the mages stepped forward and told Alan that they couldn't use magic as powerful as he wanted. Another mage echoed this sentiment, explaining that most of them could only take down one monster per attack, and dealing with a horde of monsters would be a nightmare. Amidst the adventurers, Mia, a member of Alan's own group, stepped forward. No one expected to hear what she was about to say. Mia admitted that she wasn't strong enough, which was a huge blow to Alan's reputation. She tried to explain that their previous failure was just a one-time thing, but she knew it wasn't true. She revealed that after their failure, she had tried to improve her magic attacks, but it was all for nothing. Her magic was far from the level needed to take out 10 monsters at once, as Alan demanded. She confessed to everyone that she had never been able to use such powerful magic. The adventurers heard that even the heroes group wasn't confident, and that made them lose hope too. Alan called out to Lulu, who tried to reassure Mia, saying it was just one failure and she shouldn't worry. Ruru agreed, saying that just because they failed once didn't mean they'd fail again. Alan chimed in, saying everything would be fine as long as he was around. But then Mia dropped a bombshell on Alan, revealing that she hadn't been training at all since their last failed quest. She asked Alan if he still believed it would be okay when she had done nothing but slack off. Alan was taken aback and had to defend himself, as his reputation was on the line. The surrounding adventurers began to murmur about how Alan hadn't even swung his weapon in practice recently. Alan tried to excuse himself, claiming he was busy recruiting new members for their party. Mia, feeling hurt and frustrated, couldn't stand his fake pride anymore. She started crying and shouted at Alan, saying he used to be strong, but now he wasn't the same Alan she had admired. She ran off in tears, leaving Alan trying to chase after her to explain. However, the knights stopped him. Angry and desperate, Alan yelled at the knights to move aside. Later that night, a general questioned Alan about why he had stopped training. Alan arrogantly replied that he was a hero, so it wasn't a big deal if he skipped training sometimes. The general, fed up with Alan's attitude, felt sick of his excuses. Alan declared in front of everyone that he was the hero, but the general spoke up, saying Alan didn't deserve that title. Alan was hurt and took a step back. Frustrated, he asked the general to hit him, but to everyone's surprise, the general stopped Alan's punch. This shouldn't have been possible, but it showed that Alan was weaker than even low-level adventurers. The general told Alan to leave rather than waste their time. When Alan tried to argue back, Ruru stopped him, saying it would be better for them to go. Other adventurers were watching Alan's outburst, and his selfish frustration was obvious. Alan yelled that everyone else was the problem and stormed out, followed by Ruru and Sheena. As they left, Alan shouted he didn't care about anyone there. Sheena wondered if they should really leave, as not participating in the emergency request would hurt their reputation. Alan, angry and defiant, said he knew that but claimed it didn't matter because no one cared about him. He believed people would eventually come crying to him for help. Back at the guild, everyone was discussing how the hero didn't live up to the rumors. The general was shocked too, as he remembered Alan and his team being stronger and well coordinated in previous battles. He wondered what had happened to them. Then Lena appeared, asking to join the fight. She knew she wasn't in good condition, but wanted to help in any way she could, even if it meant being a shield for others. The general reminded her of her poor condition, and she acknowledged it but insisted on fighting for the city. She bowed, showing her determination. The general, though appreciative, politely asked her not to push herself too hard. Lena agreed to accept their help. The other adventurers were happy to have Lena with them, believing she was worth 100 men. Lena apologized in advance for any trouble she might cause, and promised to do her best. The general told her to let him know if she needed anything, and Lena made an important request. She asked everyone present if they knew a man named Lloyd in the city. Meanwhile, Lloyd and his group arrived at an isolated house. UI asked if there was something there, and Lloyd said he believed they were close to the source of the bad events happening around. He mentioned there was a demon involved, and it was right in front of them. This surprised everyone, and they asked if he was sure it was a demon, since demons lived in the realm of darkness and were banned from entering their country. Lloyd suggested that the demon might have slipped in from somewhere, so they needed to report this to the knights. Cross agreed they should report it. Lloyd warned them of the danger ahead, but felt the same demon energy he had sensed before. He believed the demon was linked to the monster attacks on them, and that their true target was the city of Ishtar. He saw this as a good reason to move forward despite the danger, and left the final decision to the group. After some thought, their leader, Yu, decided they should act. They couldn't let these evil beings roam freely, and they couldn't ignore the demon threat. They hoped to find clues to solve the mystery, and began planning their entry into the house. Lloyd told them the demon wasn't actually inside the house, and asked Silica if she could use earth magic. Meanwhile, in a room, the evil people were planning a monster attack on the city. Suddenly, the ceiling above them collapsed as they were in an underground space all along. Lloyd had sensed their energy, and the evil people were trapped under the rubble. Yu and the others ambushed them quickly, not giving them a chance to react. One of the bad guys tried to grab a magic staff, but Yu stepped on it to stop him. Another one tried to escape the rubble, but saw everyone captured and moved toward the staff. Lloyd then tied them up, preventing any use of magic. Lloyd ensured one of the captives couldn't use magic by tying his mouth shut, and Dugas joined to see most of the work was done. Dugas and Yu took down 3 more demons, and Lloyd thanked them for their help. Yu said it was a team effort. El was happy with everyone's presence and admitted he couldn't have done it alone. Then Cross called everyone over, looking desperate. They followed him and found a terrifying scene. A beast girl, brutally chained and covered in wounds. They couldn't believe someone could torture another living being like this. Lloyd noted that the situation was worse than they thought, seeing the beast girl in such a fragile state.